When it comes to your sexual health, take it from someone who's been there before. Take it from me. Today, Tanya talks to Rebecca about finding out what it means to them to be your own woman.
Growing up in the Midwest, well, for me, it was, life, just normal life. It was when I moved away, when I moved to New York City, that I realized just how different the Midwest was in terms of just ideology, how people did things, being in a relationship, being married. I mean, just building a family. That's really, something that you do. By the time you're 30, you should have some kids, at least one, if not, a couple. And moving to New York City was very different. Most of the people that I knew and was around, you wouldn't even see kids. And nobody was expected to have any kids because we were all, hustling and doing our thing as artists, but definitely in St. Louis, family and kind of that Midwest lifestyle of working every day, 9 to 5, you take one vacation a year, the kids go to summer camp, but everything revolves around, honestly, having a family. From football games and school events, it's really about the kids once you hit a certain age. And it's almost like, well, what do the adults do? It's like you get lost. You're so focused on family. I have friends who are mothers and they're just like, every time they want something for themselves, they feel guilty.
Yeah, that's interesting because I grew up in London, but my dad is from Spain and he's from quite a small village in Spain. So all of my family that I knew from there, they were very much like, oh, you're getting big, where's your boyfriend? So me and all my cousins, oh, okay, you're 12 now, like you must be. Like literally
you're
from
12.
Yeah, from when we were young, they were like, oh, okay, like when are you gonna get married? But that was there, but in London it's not like that.
Yeah, I think the social norms were huge for them to follow this kind of path, to be this traditional wife or be this, traditional husband and have this, this family, this white picket fence, that kind of thing. And I think today it's fine that you're not that because it's really interesting how we take other people's ideals and internalize them as if we should live that way.
Yeah, I think that must be more of like a generational thing to have that ideal of what it should be like.
Yeah.
But then within each family, there's these things that go on that people don't really, well, for example, in my family, some people, they didn't really like talking about the fact that one of my oldest cousins had a kid and wasn't married. Like that was a bad thing, like they sort of didn't want to mention that. But yeah, I think that probably the older generation want to live up to this ideal that just doesn't really exist anymore. My mum, so before I came here actually, my mum was encouraging me to come because she went travelling when she was younger. That's how she met my dad.
Yeah, that's how it works.
So even though my dad comes from a very traditional village background, my mum was the explorer. So she was telling me, yes, go, go, go. My grandma, my Spanish grandma, she had 9 children. So she was like pushing out babies pretty much her whole adult life. So there wasn't any room for her to think, oh, what should I be doing with my career?
Right.
So yeah, that's just really what emphasized it for me, seeing her life and how she lived it compared to what we can do now with ours.
Yeah, my grandmothers, one had 8 and one had 6.
Wow.
And it's funny because all of their kids, for the most part, didn't have more than 2 or 3 kids. They just were like, no, we're not gonna have big families because that's a huge commitment. It's definitely interesting, the generational thing, and just even having the choice to travel. Like my mother wanted to live in a different city, but my grandmother wouldn't let her, and she wasn't able to move. And as soon as I got of age, I was like, I'm out, I went to college and I left and decided to go to New York, and I was like, my mother and father were scared, but at the same time they knew she wants to travel and see the world, and I was able to do that. Women aren't the only ones who have these societal these societal parameters and constrictions because men have been taught they should provide. And I think that if they don't have that role, it's like, well, where do I fit in this? For me personally, it has definitely been an issue being so independent and so self-sufficient. If you're threatened by the fact that I'm successful,
that's true.
You ain't the dude for me. Working on yourself is the biggest thing that you can do. If you are solid in who you are, you're going to find or attract a person who appreciates that.
I am guilty of me and my friends. I see my friends do it as well. If we meet a guy and they tend to be a bit more You can tell like what they're thinking. We dumb ourselves down a lot. Looking at a lot of my friends that have become very successful and have always been single and are getting older, it seems like it's harder to attract a man the more successful you become as a woman. My oldest brother is 10 years older than me, and when he was at school, his friends would call girls out if they were sleeping around. But I feel like when I was at school, boys didn't really do that. Like, that had sort of become an old-fashioned thing by the time I got to school. And I say this to my mum all the time, and she's like, no, I don't think you're right. They probably just say it, but behind your back. And I'm like, no, I really don't.
No.
I really don't think so. It's more like of an accepted thing that girls and women can do what they want.
For myself, just personally, growing up, there was definitely a double standard in the way boys could behave sexually and the way girls could behave. If you were an openly sexual girl who, you know, slept with multiple people, you were definitely slut shamed for that. I never had that issue. I wasn't that kind of girl who wanted to sleep with a bunch of people. But as I got older and not having children, or not a guy not being the center of my world, did cause some issues, particularly recently in terms of getting married. I have had some issues with men I've dated who feel, and they always say, I act like a guy.
So they feel emasculated.
Well, it's funny because they're masculine guys, but they feel like, it's almost like if a woman doesn't want to marry me, then what space do I have in her life? What am I even needed?
For more trusted sources on the topics that matter to you, go to getmegiddy.com.